Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of my Trench Crusade painting series. And this time I'm going to be doing a Grimdark speed painting video with this squad of Mechanised Infantry, which I printed a few months back and hadn't got round to painting. And I'm going to be trying to paint these models up quickly while pushing the Grimdark style. And the first part of the process is to add a little bit of pre-texture to all of the armour panels, using some AK muddy ground, but any similar textured paste would also do here. And by applying this randomly to some of the armour panels, more focused towards the bottom sections of each of the armour panels, it's going to provide some nice texture to these areas, which is going to help sell the rusty effect that I'm going to be applying a little bit later on in the process. And after applied, I'll just go back in with a damp brush to feather out some of the harsh edges from the textured paste. And after that was done, I'm then going to prime the model with some black primer. And as always, I'm using my Colourforge matte black, but any black primer would do here. And the next part of the process is to build up the base for the contrast paints, which I'll be applying next. And to do that, I'm going to be using some Army Painter Company Grey, but any light grey would do here, in conjunction with a dry brush. And I'm just going to use this to apply a heavy dry brush or overbrush to the entire model. And it's important here that you cover the entire model and don't leave any of the black primer left behind, apart from in the very deepest of recesses. And the reason for this is, as I said, I'm going to be using contrast paints, and because of their transparency, they don't apply at all onto any black areas. So you just need to make sure that you don't miss out any large areas and leave them in the black primer. Otherwise, when you apply the contrast paint, it's going to look a little bit funny. So just make sure you do multiple passes with this, going back in at the end and double checking that you've covered all areas on the model. And you could also start from a white primer, but if you do this, then you're not going to have all the recesses shaded in black, which means you're not going to get a nice contrast once the speed paints have been applied. But by doing it this way, you keep the contrast in all the recesses and provide a really nice base for the speed paints to be applied. And you could also do this via an airbrush. However, I prefer the dry brushing method. I find it takes around about the same time, but produces a much better base for the contrast and speed paints. And now that the base had been laid, it's time to apply the speed paints. And for this I'm going to be trying out a few different colours. And I'm going to be using a green, a blue and a red, all Vallejo Express colours, and I went for Commando Green, Legacy Blue and Seraph Red. And I'm just going to be applying these over the entire model, which should give a nice vivid colour on all of the light grey areas that were dry brushed in the previous step, while leaving all of the recesses still in the black primer. And I'm going to be applying these via an airbrush, as I find that it applies much smoother when you do use an airbrush, especially with a model with so many large flat panels. But you could just apply this by brush as well. You would just need to make sure that you avoid any of that kind of excess pooling and staining that can occur when brushing on speed paints to flat panels. And once all of the colours had been applied, I then went in with some Army Painter Banshee Brown and used a dry brush to dry brush stipple this onto all of the rough texture paste areas that was applied at the beginning of the painting process. And this is going to start to help to push that battle-worn look, as well as provide a nice base for some of the rust effects I'll be applying later on. And I'm also going to use this colour to very lightly dry brush over all of the raised edges on the model, which is going to give all of these areas a nice chipped and battle damaged look. And I'll also just go in and stipple on some chips and scratches as well, just randomly across the armour panels. And for all of the chips, scratches and damaged edges, just make sure you are going in very lightly with the amount of paint that's on the brush, and just build it up slowly over multiple passes. Next it was time to tackle all of the metallics, and to do that I'm going to be using a combination of Army Painter Heavy Metal and Gunmetal. And I forgot to mention that I pre-blacked out all of the metallic areas before the previous step. And I'm just going to go in firstly with the Heavy Metal and give all of these blacked out metallic areas a light dry brush all over with the Heavy Metal. And then come in with the Gunmetal with an even lighter dry brush, and only focusing my dry brushing on all of the upward facing areas. And then once that was done, I then applied a coat of satin varnish to all of the models, before applying the enamel shading process, which is going to involve a 2-to-1 mix of Villainy Inc.'s Goon's Grime and Ichor of the Damned, which I also mixed 1-to-1 enamel to white spirits, which is going to produce a really nice dark brown grimy enamel wash. And I'm just going to apply this to all three models and allow the wash to flow into all of the cracks and recesses, which is not only going to provide a unifying wash across the entire model, but also darkening all of the recesses and providing some additional contrast. And if you've watched any of my previous videos, you'll know the drill by now. Leave the model for around 10 to 20 minutes until it is dry to the touch, and then go in with some makeup sponges, slightly dampened with some white spirits, and use this to remove all of the excess enamel wash from all of the upwards and raised surfaces. And this just helps to bring back some of the colour and brightness to all of the highlighted areas, while leaving all of the shadows and recesses still darkened with the enamel wash. And once that had fully dried, I then go in with some dirty down rust and apply this undiluted to all of the rough and textured areas that I created with the textured paste at the beginning of the process, which is going to give a really nice rusty effect to all of these areas. And I'm also going to use this to stipple onto all of the metallic areas as well, giving the entire model and all of the metallics a really heavily rusted and battle-worn Grimdark look. And the final part of the painting process is to go in with some Army Painter True Blood, along with a toothbrush, and use this to spray some blood effects onto some selected areas on the model to give them that drenched in the blood of endless war look. And after that was done, all three models are now complete and ready to be added to the ranks of my New Antioch faction. And I think out of all three models, my favourite turned out to be the blue infantry. I feel the colour really complements the rust effect, a little bit more so than the other two. But do let me know in the comments down below which colour you preferred. And as always, a big thank you to all of my Patreon subscribers. I truly appreciate you helping me keep all my content free for everyone, so thank you. And until next time, happy painting, and I'll see you in the next one.